Have you ever been called out, whether it's at school, work, maybe when you were younger in your family? Normally, being called out doesn't have a good connotation, and you can probably already think of an instance where you were called out when I started saying that, to be honest with you. And, normally just the Jarena or the whatever, or if they're calling you by a title, Mrs. Knotts, I need to see you, or I need to talk to you, normally brings this complete reevaluation of your life and what did I do wrong? Did I do something wrong? Type of mentality. But you also have the good part of being called out, maybe a recognition or something positive that you've done, especially more in a work setting or maybe in a school setting, maybe in a college setting. But we've all had that experience of being called out, whether it's for something bad, something that we view as bad, or something that we view as good. Well, I want to take a look at one specific moment today of someone being called out in Scripture, and we'll touch on a few other ones that I think are really important in Scripture. So I hope that you will join us today as we go dive into Coffee Corner. My name is Jarena, and we are so glad that you're joining us today. Hi y'all, and as I said before, welcome back to Coffee Corner. You can even see I was noticing in the background that this camera, that we're starting to get ready for the winter months. We have our marshmallows that are starting to go with our hot chocolate, because there is just something about winter months that bring out the hot chocolatey spirit in most people. I was going to say all people, but maybe you're not a hot chocolate person. A lot of times I don't just drink hot chocolate by itself. Normally I'm adding it to my coffee, but I was just noticing that we had marshmallows, and I thought I should point that out to all of y'all that are starting to feel. I know a lot of people this year, because it is crazy 2020, are already getting into the Christmas spirit, but right now we are waiting to hold back on that Christmassy atmosphere decoration stuff until after Thanksgiving. We're traveling out of town for Thanksgiving, and I'm really excited for that. But yeah, the marshmallows are at least out, so that's a little bit of my holiday spirit starting to creep into my everyday life. But let's go ahead and actually jump into what our introduction was about, which is the different calling outs of Scripture. And obviously this one that got me started on this whole idea is from the Gospels. And it's from Luke, hold on, I'm looking for a reference, Luke 2:47. And it is when Jesus has been called by Jairus, to go heal his daughter. And while he's on the way there, the woman who has had an issue of blood for 12 years, I believe, come and she touches the garment of Christ. And I think it's very, very unique. In verse 47 of chapter 8, it says in the, hold on, let me go back to verse 6. Jesus said, let me go back to verse 45. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" When all denied, Peter and they that were with him said, "Master, the multitude throng thee and press thee, and sayest thou, Who touched me?" And Jesus said, "Somebody hath touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me." And when the woman saw that she was not hid, she came forth trembling, and falling down before him, declared unto him before all the people for the cause that she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately. And really the phrase that caught my attention in verse 47 was that first phrase that says, "And when the woman saw that she was not hid." Which, if you really think about that phrase, it makes no humanly logical sense, because we just got through with verse 45, who everyone was denying that they had touched Christ, and Peter and the rest of the disciples and those that knew him said, why are you asking this? There's people all around you. It makes no sense for you to ask. So in my mind, it's saying no one knew that she had touched him. No one. I mean, she did, obviously. And Christ knew. But then verse 37 says, when the woman saw that she was not hid. And I think that it's so telling that even though no one else knew, Christ knew, and that was enough. And Christ called her out, not by name. We don't know this woman's name. We don't really know much about her at all. But Christ saw her. Christ called her out. And there's just several different callings out and like questions throughout the scripture that I just think are so amazing. And this is not comprehensive. These are just two other examples. And the first one goes all the way back to Genesis when God is calling out Adam. He's saying, Adam, where are you? And it's not that God didn't know where Adam was. It's not that Christ didn't know who this woman was, it's not that he didn't know who touched him. It's that he wanted that verbal recognition of what they had done. In Adam's case, it was a confession of sin and really the down spiral of the rest of humanity. And it wasn't a positive thing, but God wanted Adam to come forth and personally admit and personally come and have that fellowship and have that face-to-face with God time. And I think another really important calling out that happens is also in Genesis, but much later in Genesis, when God is wrestling with Jacob. And I believe it's as Jacob, after God has dislocated Jacob's hip, that he asks, who are you? And obviously God knows who Jacob is, and Jacob has to look at him and say, I'm Jacob. And all of the connotation that comes along with that of being a liar, being a cheat, and all of this stuff. But God didn't call him out just to necessarily humiliate him and to make him, grovel before him. I mean, there is a part of recognizing who you are in Jacob. But he brings it to a point of recognition so that he can change all that. Because it's at that point that God changes his name from Jacob to Israel, Prince with God. And that he changes who Jacob is. But he first had to come to that recognition. And that's also where Adam had to come. He had to come and he had to face God. He had to admit that he had done something wrong before there was restitution. God, in that conversation with Adam, tells him, okay, yes, you've sinned, and yes, there's going to be consequences for that sin, but there is one who will come to rescue humanity from their sin and from this process that you've started in your rebellion against me. And then we come fast forward into Luke, and we have Christ here, who is the fulfillment of Adam's prophecy, who was the incarnate God that wrestled with Jacob. And again, he's calling people out. He's calling people out in a restorative way. I don't think by any means that Christ was calling her out to embarrass her. He wanted her to recognize that he knew her, that he recognized her need, that he knew her as an individual and he valued her as an individual. She wasn't just part of the masses that surrounded him, or as Peter says, the throng that surrounded him. She was a very specific individual with specific needs, and he wasn't going to let that just pass. He was on his way to a leader's house, a leader of a synagogue's house, and she was no one. She was an outcast because of her physical ailments. But just as important as Jairus was in the synagogue and his daughter was, this woman who was a nobody, who was an outcast, was just as important to him. And he took time to recognize her and to recognize not only her need, but her physical restoration and her spiritual restoration with Christ. I think it's such a beautiful picture to know that, God is no respecter of persons. And I think sometimes we need reminded that. I think this story is a perfect reminder that he didn't just keep going, because he would have known who it was. She would have been healed. And honestly, we could have gone on, and yes, her life would have been radically changed and it would have been great for her. But Christ wanted that recognition of her to know that she was important to him, that she wasn't just another random miracle that he was doing, but that she as an individual was important. I think it was also a testament that it was a testimony to the crowd that showed the crowd that everyone was important to Christ. It didn't matter what your status was. It didn't matter what your social status was. It didn't matter what your educational status was. It didn't matter what your gender was. Whatever it was, whoever you were important to Christ. And it's so beautiful that he asks a question that he perfectly knew the answer to, but it was so that she recognized that he was important, just as he did with Jacob. He asked him a question so that he recognized who he was, and then God took him and changed him. And Adam, he pulled him out. He didn't just let Adam hide and divulge into sin with no hope. He called Adam out. He said, "Where are you, Adam?" And then he presented the consequences and the plan of rescue. And when God calls us out, and maybe in Adam's case, it's out of our shame, even with Adam, it's out of shame. With Jacob, it's out of, I just had the word and now I lost it. I don't know what the word was. It was a perfect word. Adam was out of shame. Jacob was more out of this, denial, this running, this fear that he had, out of weakness. That's the word I was looking for. He calls Jacob out of his weakness because he's debilitated with his hip. And he calls this woman out of, just complete obscurity. It doesn't matter where you find yourself. It doesn't matter if you find yourself in shame. It doesn't matter if you find yourself in weakness or in just general obscurity or rejection. There's hope. And God is calling out to you. And God's calling out to you as a personal individual who he knows your desires and your needs. And he's the one that can fulfill all that. He's the one that can change things. And he's the one that can change you. And I think these calling outs in Scripture are just so beautiful. And honestly, as I'm talking through this, I'm being more and more amazed by it. That Christ calls out the individual. And we're important to him as people, not our contributions to society, not our contributions even to the body of believers, which is important, but he's interested in us as individuals, and our soul and our spirit and our heart and our desires. And it's such a beautiful picture. So I hope that this was an encouragement to you. I know that a lot has been going on, and this was an encouragement to me. It's even being more of an encouragement to me now as I'm talking through it with you guys. And I hope that you guys have a great rest of the week. It is hump day. We're halfway through the week. And, it's been a good week. It's been a crazy week, but it's been a good week. So if you guys haven't subscribed below, I'd love if you consider subscribing. It helps me it's just a little bit of encouragement for me to keep doing this and putting in time that I need to record and edit and all that fun stuff. If you subscribe but you haven't rung the bell, go ahead and do that as well, because sometimes I am a little bit inconsistent with my posting, and that'll help notify you. But yeah, needless to say, guys, have a great rest of your week. I will hopefully see you guys again on Friday. Have a great day. Bye.